During class, we had a limited amount of time to talk about what it is that really makes the path to success. But let's take a couple of examples here so that you can understand what trade-offs you need to make as an entrepreneur and how important the kinds of decisions you make are to the impact of the business. The first case in point I'd like to use is that of the outlier customer. Many times as an entrepreneur, you'll come up against your first customer and you'll find that their needs aren't really in line with what you thought was your product roadmap. The question here is that because your product roadmap is wrong, or because the customer is not the right one to pursue? You probably won't know, but what you'll have to do is quickly discern what it is that the customer is asking you to do that's really worth pursuing to help you move the business forward, and whether that's worth taking versus the extraneous features and functionality they're asking for that will take you off track. And of course, there's another consideration. You may need to just take that customer for pure cash flow reasons. As usual, there's no one right or wrong answer. So long as you're clear what you're doing and why it is that you're taking that customer and how you're going to use them as the basis to move the business forward, whether it's your product or your target market or your business model or whatever it is that you manage to validate, then it can work great. But if by contrast you blindly take customers without considering how they're moving the business forward, you can very quickly find yourself with products that are bloated and timelines that extend and resources that are wasted as you don't converge on a product market fit. Hopefully you do find a series of customers whose needs are the same and who you can deliver consistently to form the basis of your initial minimum viable segment and to start to build some momentum in the business. Now let's move down the track and see what happens as we start to gain more customers. Maybe you're finding that they're all actually aligning quite nicely with your value proposition, or maybe not. The question is, if they're not, do you pivot or iterate? And what's the difference? Well, let's consider what I've seen many times. Entrepreneurs often feel like if it's hard to meet a set of customers' needs, they're struggling and their product is the issue. And in fact, that may be exactly the wrong time to pivot. The right thing might be to actually dig in and hone in on the customer's problem rather than worry about what your product is doing. Understand what their business issue is. Then as you uncover that issue, you might discover that while your product is a part of the problem, a greater issue is how it's integrated with everything else that is being used in the customer's situation. And in which case, the solution might be to include some services and maybe even change your business model and the way you're packaging and pricing your overall solution and delivering it to the customer. That iteration, rather than pivoting away from that market, might be the key to you finding and uncovering some real business value on which to accelerate the business. What I see in great entrepreneurs is often that they see these problems as opportunities. That's to say, they dig in and figure out how to get closer to their customers and expose the underlying opportunity that might give them the basis to build something really valuable in the way of a substantive solution that can be differentiated and distinguished. So again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It might indeed be totally appropriate to pivot away from the group of customers that you've started out with. They might be leading you to a place that isn't delivering value. But by contrast, it may be totally inappropriate to pivot away if all you're finding is that meeting their needs is hard. After all, if it's hard and it turns out that instead of pivoting away from the problem, you can iterate around it and really dig in with the customers to figure out how to meet their needs, then it's more likely that you're going to be delivering something of real substantive value at that point. Now, to give you an example of some of the other challenges you'll find on the path to success, there are things like the funding mirage, which leads people to believe that just because they've raised money, they're on a successful track, or the challenge of reworking your business model, or the near-death experience that can come out of nowhere, such as a major competitor entering the marketplace, or a lawsuit that comes at you unexpectedly. All these things are just sent to try you, and the key is not to lose sight of what you're really doing here, which is building something for the long term. In many instances, the hardest times I've faced as an entrepreneur have all been about figuring out how to just take one step forward. And if you keep doing that, you'll find that you can very quickly move to a place where the view is very different. And the challenges that you've left behind put you in a position to distance yourself from competitors. But as I suggest here on the chart, one area never to take for granted is your human capital. It's always the most important capital in your business. And figuring out how to constantly develop and evolve your team, and if necessary, upgrade it, is a critical part of the success of the business. And finally, as you do start to get real repeatability, you'll almost invariably be faced with the challenge of whether to focus on growth or getting leverage out of your business model. I can tell you again, there's no one right or wrong answer. Sometimes the market is going to reward growth, and it'll be worth just investing in and building out your market position so you can really dominate it. But other times it'll be important to figure out how you can show real leverage in your business model to put yourself in a position where you can control your own destiny in a profitable manner. Whatever the case, consciously make these decisions with a view to how it is you're building lasting value in the business in a way that can sustain the business to ultimate long-term independent success.
Here's the reality. There's a game you've got to get used to. It's called the ungame. If you're going to have a breakthrough, if you're going to make a breakout, you're going to go into uncharted territory. You're going to be in unexplored areas. You're going to have undefined basis on which to figure things out, like your business model